Hello, and welcome. I'm so glad you're here. Let the weight of the day soften like twilight melting into night. Breathe deeply and feel the quiet settle around you, warm as a hearth, gentle as falling rain. Tonight, we'll step into a hidden cottage deep in an enchanted forest, where the air hums with the scent of herbs and honey, and every stone in the walls holds a story. It's a place where time moves like a slow stream, where firelight paints golden shapes on the ceiling, and where the rain sings lullabies against the diamond-paned windows. This is a story of quiet magic, of chamomile tea steeped in patience, of wild creatures trusting enough to visit, of solitude that feels like an embrace. So let your shoulders relax, your eyelids grow heavy. Imagine the sound of rain on leaves, the flicker of candlelight, the warmth of a well-loved chair. And when you're ready, we'll begin, wrapped in the cozy hush of a forest cottage where peace has taken root. The rain began as Snow White was lighting the evening candles in her hidden cottage, each droplet a gentle kiss against the diamond-paned windows. She paused, match still flickering between her fingers, and listened to the symphony beginning overhead. First a whisper, then a murmur, then the full-throated song of an autumn storm settling over the enchanted forest like a wool blanket pulled close. This cottage was her secret, known to none but the woodland creatures who had helped her build it years ago, when the memory of poisoned apples had finally faded, and she yearned for solitude sweeter than any palace could offer, tucked between two ancient oaks, whose branches intertwined like lovers' fingers above the moss-soft roof. It seemed to breathe with the rhythm of the earth itself. The walls were built from river stones, each one chosen for its particular curve and color: pale gray like morning mist, warm amber like honey, soft green like new leaves. Between the stones, she had pressed dried flowers and herbs: chamomile for peace, lavender for dreams, rosemary for remembrance of all the gentle things the world contained. Inside, everything spoke of comfort earned through solitude. Hand-woven rugs in shades of forest green and earth brown covered the wide plank floors, their patterns telling stories of seasons turning and years of quiet contentment. The walls held shelves carved from fallen branches, each one cradling books with worn spines, ceramic bowls glazed in midnight blue, and small treasures gifted by her woodland friends: a cardinal's fallen feather, a perfectly round stone from the brook, a crystalline piece of ice that never melted. As the rain grew stronger, Snow White moved through her evening ritual with the slow grace of one who had learned to savor each moment. She filled her copper kettle with spring water that bubbled up through a pipe connected to the underground stream, its small song a constant whisper of moving water beneath the cottage. The fire in the stone hearth crackled with applewood and birch, sending golden light dancing across the hand-painted tiles that surrounded it. each one depicting a different flower from her secret garden. The cottage was small enough that she could tend the fire, prepare her tea, and watch the rain, all without taking more than a few steps. This was how she had designed it. This sense of everything being within reach, everything necessary and nothing superfluous. After years of grand chambers and echoing halls, she had discovered that happiness lived not in space, but in the careful curation of beauty. Thunder rolled overhead, not harsh, but gentle like a giant turning in his sleep. Through the windows she could see the rain transforming her garden into something even more magical than usual. Water pooled in the broad leaves of the hostas she had planted along the shaded north side, creating tiny mirrors that reflected the cottage's warm light. The climbing roses that framed her door drooped under the weight of accumulated droplets, each bloom heavy with perfume that the rain released in waves. Her herb garden, carefully tended in raised beds made from fallen logs, seemed to shimmer with an inner light as the rain fed roots that had grown deep over years of patient cultivation. Thyme and oregano, sage and mint, all drinking deeply and releasing their fragrances into the humid air. The small greenhouse she had built against the cottage's south wall glowed like a lantern, its glass panels streaming with water that caught and scattered the firelight from within. Snow White settled into her favorite chair, a wingback piece she had rescued from an abandoned manor and reupholstered in fabric the color of deep forest shadows. The kettle began to sing, its voice joining the rain's chorus, and she rose to prepare her evening tea, a blend of her own creation. Chamomile from her garden dried apple pieces saved from last autumn's harvest, a touch of honey from the hive she tended at the forest's edge, and rose petals dried in her attic among bundles of lavender. As the tea steeped, she opened the cottage's single door and stood beneath the deep eave, breathing in air perfumed with petrichor and growing things. The rain fell straight down in the windless evening, each drop visible in the light spilling from her windows, like thousands of tiny stars descending from the purple-gray sky. A red squirrel chattered from the oak above, his voice bright with indignation at being caught in the downpour. Snow White smiled and retreated inside, returning with a handful of hazelnuts, which she scattered on the covered sections of her porch. Other creatures began to appear, field mice with whiskers trembling with raindrops, a young rabbit whose fur stood up in damp spikes, a family of raccoons with their masked faces turned up hopefully toward her door. This was the magic she had discovered in Solitude, not the dramatic enchantments of fairy tales, but the quiet miracle of being trusted by wild things. They came to her cottage, as if drawn by some invisible thread, understanding that here was sanctuary, here was someone who moved through the world gently and left beauty in her wake. The evening deepened, and the rain strengthened into something more substantial, drumming against the roof with a rhythm that seemed to match the beating of her contented heart. Snow White drew the curtains partway across the windows, filtering the lamplight into something softer, more intimate. She lit more candles, beeswax tapers in brass holders she had found in an antique shop in a distant village, their flames steady and warm. Settling back into her chair with her steaming cup, she opened a leather-bound journal and began to write by candlelight. These were not the dramatic adventures that bards might sing, but the small revelations that filled her days, the way morning glory vines had begun climbing the trellis she had built for them, the family of wrens who had nested in the eaves and were raising their second brood of the season. Outside, the rain continued its gentle percussion against leaf and stone and glass. Occasionally, lightning flickered in the distance, illuminating the garden in brief, silver moments that made everything look touched by starlight. Thunder followed, muffled and rolling, like a conversation held in the sky's vast chambers. The cottage seemed to settle around her as the storm strengthened, its stone walls and heavy timbers holding steady against wind and weather. This was architecture that understood its place in the world, not fighting against the elements, but welcoming them, incorporating the rain's music and the wind's whispers into its very being. Snow White set down her pen and moved to the small kitchen alcove, where she began preparing a simple supper. On nights like this, she craved foods that matched the weather's mood. A soup made from root vegetables stored in her cellar, its broth rich with herbs from her garden and cream from the cow she shared with a neighboring farm. She cut thick slices from a loaf of bread she had baked that morning, its crust crackling and crumb dense with seeds and grains. As she cooked, the cottage filled with aromas that layered themselves like harmonies in a favorite song. The soup simmered, releasing steam that carried notes of carrot and parsley, thyme and bay leaves. The bread warmed by the fire, its yeasty sweetness mixing with the applewood smoke and the green scent of rain drifting through the slightly open door. The storm reached its peak as she sat down to eat, rain now falling in sheets that made the world beyond her windows disappear into gray mystery. She ate slowly, savoring each spoonful of soup, each bite of bread spread with butter churned from that morning's cream and honey harvested from her own hives. Between bites, she listened to the rain's variations, now drumming hard against the roof, now gentling to a whisper on the leaves, now gusting in waves that made the cottage creak softly like a ship riding comfortable swells. After supper, she washed her dishes in the deep stone sink, the sound of water on ceramic, adding its own note to the evening's symphony. Through the window above the sink, she could see almost nothing. The rain had drawn a curtain across the world, making her cottage feel like the only warm, dry place in all of existence. This sense of cozy isolation was one of her greatest pleasures. In the palace of her youth, she had never been truly alone, never experienced the deep satisfaction of providing for herself in a space entirely her own design. Here, surrounded by the storm, She felt held by something larger than herself, yet completely in control of her small domain. She banked the fire carefully, arranging the logs so they would burn slowly through the night, providing just enough warmth to keep the cottage comfortable. The rain showed no signs of stopping, and she found herself hoping it would continue until dawn, giving her a complete night wrapped in this cocoon of sound and safety. Moving to her bedroom, she changed into a nightgown made from fabric soft as flower petals, its pale blue color reminiscent of very early morning skies. The bedroom was the cottage's most intimate space, with a window seat that looked out into the garden and walls painted the color of moonlight on water. Her bed, carved from cherry wood by a craftsman in the village, was piled high with quilts made by her own hands during long winter evenings. She settled into the window seat with a final cup of tea, this one a blend of mint and lemon balm that would help ease her into sleep. Outside, the rain had found its steady rhythm now, no longer the dramatic percussion of the storm's peak, but the gentler, more constant music of a rain that planned to last until morning. Through the dancing droplets on the glass, she could just make out the shapes of her garden, the dark silhouettes of the fruit trees she had planted her first spring here, the ghostly white forms of the rambling roses that covered the cottage's walls in summer, the soft mounds of the herb beds that provided for all her simple needs. Each plant in her garden had been chosen with care, not just for beauty but for purpose. The apple trees whose fruit would make the pies and preserves that sweetened her winter days, the roses whose petals would become tea and potpourri, the vegetables that filled her table and cellar, the herbs that seasoned her food and scented her linens. This was the life she had chosen after all the dramatic adventures of her youth. Not a rejection of magic, but a recognition that the deepest enchantment lay in the daily miracles of seed becoming flower, storm becoming peace, solitude becoming profound contentment. As she prepared for sleep, Snow White felt the same deep satisfaction she experienced every evening in this place she had made entirely her own. The rain continued its gentle percussion against roof and window, a lullaby sung by the sky itself. Tomorrow would bring new small adventures, perhaps mushrooms to gather in the forest, or flowers to pick for drying, or bread to bake while listening to bird songs. But tonight, there was only this, the warm cottage holding her like cupped hands, the rain blessing the earth outside, and the deep, abiding peace of a life lived gently in harmony with the turning seasons. The candles burned lower, their flames dancing softly in the rain-scented air that drifted through the slightly open window. Outside, the storm continued its work of washing the world clean, preparing it for whatever magic tomorrow might bring to this secret cottage hidden in the heart of the enchanted forest.